Welcome back, and now to that visit by the UN envoy last week. He met with some North Korean leaders, and here's what we found so far. UN Political Affairs Chief Jeffrey Feltman arrived in Pyongyang on Tuesday, December 5th, making the highest level visit by a UN official in more than 6 years, as tensions grip the region over Pyongyang's nuclear and weapons programs. Video provided by the North State News Agency, the KCNA, showed Feltman and his party being greeted by North Korean officials at Pyongyang's international airport and posing for a photographer. Later on, he held a meeting with the North's Vice Foreign Minister Pak Myong-guk at the People's Palace of Culture. Some analysts hoped his visit could spark a UN-led effort to diffuse rising international tensions over Pyongyang's nuclear and missiles program. While he was in the country, a US B-1B bomber flew over the Korean peninsula as part of a large-scale joint aerial drill that denounced North Korea as pushing the peninsula to the brink of nuclear war. The bomber flew from Guam and joined US F-22 and F-35 stealth fighters in the exercises with South Korea. The annual drills, called Vigilant Ace, came after North Korea the week before tested what it called its most advanced intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach all of the United States. While the North embarked on the usual threat against South Korea and the United States and their allies, the state news agency said the Trump administration was begging for nuclear war by staging the drills. China, North Korea's main ally in the peninsula, when asked about the U.S. bombers' participation in the U.S.-South Korea military drills, said he hoped that relevant parties can maintain restraint. By Thursday, December 7th, Jeffrey Feltman met with North Korea's Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho in Pyongyang. Both were seen shaking hands and sitting down for a meeting at Mansudae Assembly Hall. By Friday, he visited hospitals and a food factory. In the regimented visit, devoid of any interaction with the press, he and the UN delegation visited the Breast Tumor Institute of the Pyongyang Maternity Hospital, the Preventive Hospital No. 3 of the Ministry of Public Health, and Pyongyang's Children's Foodstuff Factory. Though Feltman is said to have expressed willingness to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula, North Korea, in a statement carried by the official KCNA news agency, said he also acknowledged the negative impact of sanctions on humanitarian aid to North Korea. Later that day, Feltman arrived in Beijing following his 4-day visit to North Korea. Before his return from North Korea, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres appealed for unity in the face of the North Korea missile crisis and warned people not to undermine efforts of the discreet diplomacy underway in North Korea. Speaking to Japanese journalists at the United Nations office on Friday, Guterres reminded all of the importance of preventing more nations of gaining nuclear weapons.
We cannot afford to have a world in which all of a sudden the number of countries with nuclear weapons multiplies. That will increase dramatically the risks, not only for the use of nuclear weapons by these countries, but also the risks for nuclear technology to spread and for rogue organizations to have access to them. And so it is essential to make progress on disarmament, and it's essential to be very firm on non-proliferation.
Let's check in on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
French President Emmanuel Macron says Israel should make gestures towards Palestinians to revive stalled peace process. The Israeli Prime Minister was in Paris ahead of a meeting with EU foreign ministers when they will try to present a unified front after US President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. When asked about discontent across the region over Trump's decision, including harsh criticism from Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, Netanyahu said he would not be given morality lectures by the Turkish leader. He said that many Arab nations were increasingly aligned with Israel to tackle Iran's regional threat.
Well, the most important thing about peace is, first of all, to recognize that the other side has a right to exist. I think this is what's holding up the peace between Israel and the Palestinians. One of the manifestations of this refusal is the mere refusal to sit down with Israel. Here's the gesture I offer, and I offer again. I do so right here in the Elysee. I have offered continuously to Mr. Abbas to sit down and negotiate peace. I do so again. That's a gesture of peace. Nothing could be simpler. If he wants peace, he'll sit down and negotiate.
Survivors of the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki visited Oslo Botanical Gardens on Saturday, December 9, to plant seeds from the trees that grew out of the ruins of the two Japanese cities that witnessed atomic bombings in August 1945. Toyoko Tagawa, who was 6 years old when the bomb fell on Nagasaki and killed his brother, records seeing powerful flash of lights followed by loud noise and the ground shaking. She says she would like to see a worldwide ban of nuclear weapons. Tagawa was among a group of survivors of atomic bombs in Japan who traveled to Norwegian capital for Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, was awarded this year's Nobel Peace Prize by Nobel Committee, but cited the spread of nuclear weapons by countries like North Korea and the growing risk of an atomic war. The head of the group that won this year's Nobel Peace Prize on Sunday, December 10, urged nuclear nations to adopt a United Nations treaty banning atomic weapons in order to prevent the end of us. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, was awarded this year's Nobel Peace Prize by a Nobel Committee that cited the spread of nuclear weapons and the growing risk of an atomic war. ICAN is a coalition of 468 grassroots non-governmental groups that campaign for a UN treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, adopted by 122 nations in July. The treaty is not signed by and would not apply to any of the states that already have nuclear arms. Beatrice Finn, ICAN's executive director, urged them to sign the agreement. Finn delivered a Nobel lecture together with Siseko Tholo, an 85-year-old survivor of the Hiroshima atomic bombing, and now an ICAN campaigner who recorded on stage on Sunday some of her memories of the attack on August 6, 1945.
All nations around the world choose the end of nuclear weapons over the end of us. This is the choice that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons represents. Join this treaty. A moment of panic or carelessness, a misconstrued comment, or a bruised ego could easily lead us to the destruction of entire cities. A calculated military escalation could lead to the indiscriminate murder of civilians.
Procession of ghostly figures shuffled by. Grotesquely wounded people, they were bleeding, burned, blackened, and swollen. Of 250,000 souls.
British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson held almost an hour of talks with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani on Sunday, December 10, after flying to Tehran to seek the release of a jailed British Iranian aid worker. Iranian state television reported that bilateral relations, the nuclear deal and regional developments made up the axis of the talks. On Saturday, Johnson had talks with Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif about consular cases of dual nationals such as Nazani Zaghari Ratcliffe, who Britain says was visiting family on holiday when she was jailed by Iran for attempting to overthrow the government. Johnson was on only the third visit to Iran by a British foreign minister in the past 14 years.
And this is where we end the program today. I'm glad you could join us. Don't forget, comments are always welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.